So thank you all very much. I mean, there is one certainty in farming, that everything ultimately depends on soil. And when I got up this morning, it was a few years ago, the first time when we held this conference, I bought a jar of my own soil in to remind me of it. And as I'm so spectacularly lazy, this jar of soil has sat on my windowsill in my office for the last 4 years. I picked it up occasionally and not had the energy to empty it and put it down. And here it is. And what's happened to it, left to its own devices, is not scientific, but it is instructive. And in a small way, it's very inspiring. There was nothing unique about this soil. I dug it from a pit behind my greenhouse of kind of leftover soil that was not doing anything. And the only visible life in this soil was a tiny shoot emerging from its surface. And the shoot weighed approximately 1 gram, and the soil in here weighed 2.4 kilograms, which at the time was the ratio of carbon dioxide to other gases in the atmosphere. It's now about 2,301 to 2,330. But I wanted to emphasize what a small amount of carbon dioxide changes such mishap. I mean, just look at the jar now. The soil is scarcely visible for the abundance of root, stalk, and leaf, and the complexity and vivacity of what's happening in this single jar is quite bewildering. And Professor Andy Neal, who will be chairing this next session, I'm sure would tell me that I shouldn't have been surprised.
Well, if you give me a chance.
The soil, despite appearances, was teeming with life. Billions of bacteria, at least 50,000 species, have been jostling with goodness knows how many other tiny animals and plants, which have been absolutely thriving. It was only a shovelful of soil, weighing 2.4 kilograms. And look at it now. And I will turn over to Andy to follow on. He's chairing the next session. And I'm sure, I mean, he won't be surprised, but he's not been idle. He's recently founded the Devon-based Centre of Dynamic Soils, where he's Director of Research. He's got a long and distinguished career as an international soil microbiologist, so I will hand over to him to talk more expertly about soil and his team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I just say, what a real pleasure it is to be back here at Rootstock. I came through the door this morning and just so many faces that I recognize from previous years. I really feel like we're creating a huge learning cluster here, just within Devon and other places in the southwest too. So it's just a real pleasure to be here, and also a real pleasure to present to you this outstanding group of speakers today. I think we're in for a real treat. I was lucky enough to share dinner with a couple of them last night, and I couldn't get a word in edgeways for about an hour and a half. So they have a lot to talk about, and it was actually fascinating from start to finish. You really did entertain me and educate me at the same time. So we're going to be talking about resilient arable rotations, and I think in the light of what we've just been hearing, we can think about that word resilience in lots of different ways. In my mind, what we learned about how rainfall patterns are going to change and heat stress is going to change. Resilient soils in many ways are about dealing with that superfluity of water at some times and then the lack of it at others, and also in regulating the soil temperature for plants, for plant growth. And so what I hope we're going to understand is soil is a very important part of that resilient system, and we'll be thinking about, of course, resilience of much larger scales all the way up to finance. I think we do touch on finance a little. So with that, I really want to now introduce our first speaker, and I thought it's probably just okay if I just say this is John Cherry. Perhaps I ought to say a little bit more. John, I think in my mind, you were one of the mythical crowd of early adopters of regenerative agriculture in the UK. Is that fair enough to say?
Well, I'm following on from people who are clever on me. Yes.
Okay. Well, in my mind, you were one of the early adopters, and out of that sort of cluster of learning that you and your colleagues put together, spawned Groundswell, which I think a lot of us have probably been to, and I'm very happy to say I've probably contributed to your compaction quite a lot over the years. And in fact, many of us in this room have probably contributed to your compaction. And I suggested to John it would be very interesting to start off this session with some idea of the context of where regenerative agriculture was when you started and where it is now, several years after. But in truth, I haven't got a clue what he's going to talk about because he hasn't sent any slides. But he's always got 10 minutes to charm us with hopefully a little bit of context of how we got to where we are now. So John, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I haven't a clue what I'm going to say either, so this is going to be interesting. I haven't got any slides, so I will be doing some interpretive dance to illustrate what I'm going to have to say. Thank you, Andy. Yes, I mean, I had one really good idea in my life, and it's worked out very well. But which was starting groundswell. But it was really. I farm in Hertfordshire, and I've been farming with my brother for 40 odd years, and we were. Well, I in particular was unhappy the way things were going, and I learned about farming at Reading University back in the 1970s and early 80s, and I didn't learn much. You know, I wasn't really happy with the way the sort of academics approached agriculture, and I spent a lot of time reading Sir Albert Howard and Lady Eve Balfour, the original organic pioneers. And their focus was all about, organic in those days was all about how to, they wanted to make healthy food, to make the population healthy. They were unhappy of how unhealthy the population was. And the population of the UK has fluctuated over the years with being incredibly healthy, incredibly unhealthy. And today we're incredibly unhealthy as a nation. We're all dying of degenerative diseases. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, so I always wanted to go organic, but it looked far too difficult to do. It was complicated in those days. No one was telling us how to do it. So I just was a conventional farmer, like all my neighbours, because I thought if they're doing it that way, that must be the right thing to do. And it's just terribly exciting to discover someone who was doing things completely differently. I went to see Tony Reynolds up in Lincolnshire. He was a no-till farmer. He did nothing. He sold all his cultivators. He was just drilling or even scattering the seeds into the stubble of the previous year. And it worked fantastically well. You know, it wasn't 100%, but it was so fantastically cheap. Who cares? And that's got into my head. This as a sort of lazy and mean person, this is fantastic. You know, there's not much to do, and you can get rid of most of your tackle. You know, and it worked. And so we went in. It worked really well. I couldn't believe everybody wasn't doing this. Why was everyone ploughing and farting about, breaking it all up and, making a seed bed and, spending fortunes on doing everything. So I travelled around, found out a lot of things. Went to America. They're far ahead of us here. They've lost so much soil in America over the years by ploughing up the prairie, which had soils 6-8 foot deep, created by permanent grass, bison over the millennia, plough it up, whole lot blows away. Crazy. It's no-till farming came from there. We did no-till farming. We started Groundswell as a no-till show. It went down very well with people. And this is all of, really, it's all about, it was quite sort of unfashionable. No, it was fashionable at the time to talk about taking back control. I don't know if you remember that. It was an idea going around about 2016 when we started the first Groundswell. But actually, I wanted farmers to take back control of their own farms. We're bombarded with people trying to sell us things. And most agricultural shows are funded by the people who are trying to sell you things, which you may or may not need. In my head, the vast majority we don't need. And it's and so we've got all these lovely shiny tractors with, I mean, our big tractor, I don't even know how to turn the bloody thing on. It's the guy who drives it is it keeps it all to himself, but it's all far too high tech, and it's nerve-wracking to me, especially if you're dealing with animals, having machines which might go wrong at any moment, and you've no chance of mending them unless a 14-year-old with a laptop turns up and plugs it in and tells you what the error code actually means. It's like so we're just taking back control, and we were taking back. It was really I became obsessed about the soil. Groundswell was all about the soil. It still is about the soil. But there's so many other things. Sorry, I have to put my glasses on to read my notes now. There's so many other things going on that we don't know. And we started calling it a regenerative farming conference because it became more and more apparent that our current system is degenerate. We're degenerates. No, it's there's a lot of things wrong, and we can make everything better with farming. As say, when we're talking about human health, there's all these degenerative diseases, but actually a lot of the food we're producing isn't good enough. And there's increasing evidence when we talk about this a lot at Groundswell about the quality of the food you produce is directly related to the quality of the soil it's grown in and the way it's grown. And it's a and things like taste. When we taste delicious things, delicious wine, delicious beer, or whatever, that is our with taking back control of our own bodies. All this microbiome in our guts, the bacteria, are closely related to the bacteria in the soil, but they're sending messages. If you have a drink of something delicious or a cheese which pleases you very much, it's your brain saying, yes, I want more of that, please, but actually your brain's being told what to do by the bacteria in your gut. And it's kind of, so it's not, you're taking back control. Actually, the bacteria inside you are taking control of you. And we're like Daleks, going up with a kind of strange glob inside us, telling us what to do. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this now.
Going upstairs if you're a Dalek.
Yeah, I'm stuck on this platform now. And people say, well, what is regenerative farming? Isn't it just good old-fashioned farming? And in a sense, it is. But there's so much knowledge coming through from scientists. And when we started Groundswell, and we called it Groundswell because it was a movement of farmers. So a whole lot of farmers, a lot of you in here, involved. Andy's kind enough to say I was a pioneer, but I wasn't. I was just seeing that all these people are out there doing this stuff on their own farms. And it was a movement, and it was a bottom-up movement. It was a proper revolution. And all the best revolutions throughout history have been started by farmers, and this is another one. And it's a very exciting thing to be part of. I can't remember why that's relevant, but anyway, I've said it anyway. It's so what is good old-fashioned farming? Yes, no, it's the scientists. Andy probably accepted, but the scientists were way behind. The academics, it wasn't on the radar. All the agricultural colleges were still telling everyone, plough everything as much as you can. Stick all your animals in sheds. Do this, do that, do the other. And and farmers were experimenting and doing things differently and making things better. But there's Yeah. And now science has caught up. I mean, I'm a Bachelor of Science. You know, I've got a degree. I'm a Bachelor of Science. We never married, science and me. You know, I'm not really very good at all the trial stuff. You know, I just like experimenting with things that work at a kind of macro scale. But it's tremendously exciting. The stuff that's going on that we're discovering about the soil, you know, quorum sensing, all these sort of bacteria doing some weird and wonderful things that we've no idea really the implications and how we can encourage our soils to go better. I mean, one of the reasons we started groundswell, no-till worked really well for us, and then it didn't work quite so well. And, you know, what was going on? We didn't know. So let's gather all these people onto the farm to tell us. And you know, and you realise it's not just no-till. You've got to do all this other stuff. You have to follow these principles. Are you waving at me yet?
I can now. You've got 10 minutes is up.
Oh, right, okay. I'm going now. No, we need to learn. It hasn't been going very long, this revolution, and it's gaining steam and momentum all the time, and it's just a very exciting thing to be part of. And it's yeah, welcome along. I'm just going to stop there, just a random moment. I hope that's okay.
Thank you, John.
Oh, pleasure.
We've had this session in all 4 years that we've held Rootstock. And normally we've been talking about hardcore arable farming. And it struck me this morning that for the first time ever, we're actually all talking about mixed farming. And I don't know whether that's a sign of the times or whether it was just a complete fluke. But we're very focused here as the panel on although John said he was going to talk about herbal lays.
Yeah, I was.
So now's the time to introduce the fact that the session has at its core herbal lays and how to manage them as part of a resilient system. But everyone else, you can assure me, I hope, will be talking about herbal lays, and particularly, Roddy, will you please be quiet? and particularly about how they're managed within an arable rotation, and the more I've and I'm not really an expert at all, but the more I've looked at this, it's struck me that the pinch points are really about how you get from one part of the rotation to the other, and about how you do that with creating as less damage to the system as possible. And I think those are the things we're really going to be discussing. Well, the rest of us are going to be discussing anyway. The next speaker, I'm very thrilled to introduce Kit Campbell, who's come down all the way from Sutton Bonington campus at Nottingham. Particularly thrilled because she's just handed in her PhD thesis, which for her I'm sure is a huge relief, and you're giddy with wondering what on earth you're going to do with all this time now. But as part of Kit's thesis, she spent it was eventually 2 years, wasn't it, working at Honeydale Farm, Ian Wilkinson's farm, an experimental farm that you probably might know better as Farm Ed, looking at the consequences of his herbal lays in his cereal rotations there. And if you've been here before, you'll also know that we always like to sneak in at some point some beautiful pictures of soil using X-ray computer tomography. This year is no exception. Kit has also got some wonderful views of soil structure in those herbal lays. So please welcome Kit.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, so much for the introduction. I am talking about herbal lays today. So for the last 4 years, I've been based at the University of Nottingham. 2 of those years, I've been doing some work on Farm Ed. So as Andy mentioned, it's Ian Wilkinson's farm. And the focus of my PhD in part has been understanding the role of soil tillage and reduced tillage in herbal lay success. So this farm is based in Oxfordshire. It's a sandy soil, and in around 2015, Ian started to establish herbal lays, so a 4-year herbal lay into an 8-year cereal crop rotation. The seed mix he uses is a Cotswold seed mix. It's 20 species, so it's quite a diverse mix, lots of different rooting structures. And we sampled 4 plots on this map that you can see from the farm. So we sampled the Hertfordshire, which was established for 48 months, so in the last year of its integration. We sampled a plot in the blue, which was in Hertfordshire for 4 years and had recently been ploughed. It was ploughed to 10 centimetres and had a winter wheat crop drilled into it. We also sampled a no-till cereal plot. So this had not been tilled for a good few years and was also in winter wheat. And the weeds were suppressed by chemical management in this plot. And finally, we sampled a permanent pasture plot. So this was grazed by cows. And we really aimed to understand whether the Hertfordshire that Ian was putting into the soil was actually beneficial to soil health, and what effect tillage had. So when he destroyed the ley, he used tillage, and we wanted to understand what this looked like in terms of, the soil health. So it might have just cut off on the screen, but on the side, on the y-axis, on the side screens, you can see that the first measure that was assessed to understand how well this soil was working for us and the environment is called the Ecosystem Service Provision Index. So this takes a bunch of above ground measurements. So it's a whole suite of measurements like biomass production, soil cover, habitat provision, and it allows us to understand how well the managements are performing. So a higher service provision means that the management is performing better. We can see in the red, before 2015, before Ian started any of these treatments, the service provision from all of the soils were low. And this remained low in the continuous no-till cereal plot. We think this is because the primary productivity of the plot was low and there wasn't green cover for the whole year, so it wasn't productive all year round. Whereas when we look at the Hertfordshire, so the green and the blue, and if we look into the pasture plot, the SP gets considerably higher post-2015. This really indicates that the longer the soil is in productivity, the longer it's green, the higher services, general services that we're getting above ground from these managements. And we can also see on this graph, SP is on the bottom and soil organic carbon contents is on the y-axis. And service provision is directly proportional to the amount of carbon we have in the soil. So the longer the soil is productive, the longer you get carbon inputs going into the soil. And we've shown the more services we get from the soil as well. And this is really reflected in the soil organic carbon content. So it's highest in the pasture and then slightly lower in the Hertfordshire. And there's about a 0.5% decrease when you till the soil. So the cereal rotation represents the plot that was in Hertfordshire for 48 months and then was recently ploughed to 10 centimetres. This indicates there are some carbon losses occurring when you till the soil. And what my PhD has been focused on is assessing X-ray computed tomography, as Andy mentioned. So we go to the field and we take 30 centimetre cores. These are scanned at the University of Nottingham at the Hounsfield facility, placed in one of these big X-ray scanners, and our aim is to try and understand what the soil pores look like in that soil. So these are the air or water-filled space in the soil. And a bit like we were talking about the flood management earlier, they're really important for many soil functions. Some of the most are water infiltration and drainage, air and nutrient exchange, but also solute and microbial movement throughout the soil, root penetration, crop establishment. So it's really important that we try and understand and quantify these within the soil. In this grey image, yeah, it is moving. You can see a soil core that's being clipped from front to back. So the grey area is the soil, the black area represents the pores, and then any of the white area is the high density material, so usually rocks in the soil. And we can use imaging processing software to pull out a really lovely 3D visualization of the pores from the soil. So we have the thinner pores in purple and the thicker pores in yellow. What we can do with these is put each of the managements side by side. So we have roughly 30 centimetre cores from each management, the pasture, the no-till cereal, the Hertfordshire, and the cereal rotation next to each other there. The pores throughout the pasture and the no-till cereal are fairly well distributed. So all throughout the profile, there's a good arrangement of pores that are, range from very thin to quite thick. This is still fairly established in the herbal ley, so it's fairly porous throughout, but the herbal ley was ploughed 4 years ago, which might represent why it's not quite as porous as the other two managements. And we see a huge loss in porosity and poor connectivity. So that represents if the pores are isolated, so you're not getting much movement through the soil, or whether they're connected when you plough the soil. Overall, this shows that tillage is the primary driver of soil structural loss, at least when you get rid of the herbal ley in this manner. So functionally, we wanted to understand what this soil structural loss meant for other services and processes that the soil can provide. And Laura and Nadine at Rothamsted Research measured the nitrous oxide emissions on the y-axis from each of the managements and the water-filled pore space on the x-axis. And what they found is in the purple, in the wheat rotation, directly after ploughing, there is a higher proportion of nitrous oxide emissions from the wheat rotation soil. And this actually occurs at a lower water-filled pore space, so the pores have to be less full to produce more nitrous oxide. This really shows that the soil structural losses result of tillage are causing nitrogen losses, and as we saw in the last slide, some carbon losses as well. As a result of this, we spoke to Ian Wilkinson and decided to go back to the farm in a second year. And we suggested, and Ian was very happy and on board to take us upon this, to try and terminate the ley in a different manner. So the next year, a 48-month herbal ley was terminated on one side of the plot by ploughing to 10 centimetres, and on the other side of the plot by min-tilling to 3 centimetres using a Vibraflex, which is a piece of machinery that just really tickles that top area of the soil rather than full inversion. We measured the porosity in the herbal ley in the green, the min-till in the orange, and the ploughed from the soil that in the second year, and we found there is some structural losses, so some losses in porosity under min-till, but around a 4% loss in porosity under plough, so it's quite a stark difference. We also measured the macropore connectivity, and the macropore just means the biggest pore in the soil, and the herbal ley was found to be the most connective, shown by the most negative value. And the more negative values on this graph actually mean it's more connected, which is slightly counterintuitive. The herbal ley was still relatively connected, but most of the poor connectivity was lost under ploughing. So another interesting point from this research is that we actually spoke to Ian, because sometimes min-till can yield less, but Ian found a 20% increase in yield in the minimum tilled strip compared to the ploughed strip. So we think that the retention of soil structure under min-tilling versus ploughing actually confers an increase in yield in this soil. Finally, we also went to herbal leys in successive years. So on this farm, Ian has herbal leys in 18 months established, 24, 36 and 48. And we found an increase in porosity over time in all herbal leys. So there's a 2.1% increase in porosity. And we also saw that pore connectivity increased over time. So the longer he had the herbal ley in, and we don't know what would happen after 48 months, the better the structure of the soil became. It's really interesting to note that a 2.1% increase in soil porosity took 4 years to develop in this soil. When Ian tilled the soil, there was a 4% loss in porosity, and that occurred in just 1 day. So it takes 4 years to develop. Soil structural change is really, really slow, and this can be lost in just a single ploughing event. So it's really important to try and understand if we need to use ploughing, when is the best time, and are there reduced ploughing initiatives that could work as well. So just to summarise, this research showed that soil structure can be destroyed under tillage, that reduced disturbance actually minimises those soil structural losses that we see under tillage when we're trying to get rid of the herbal ley. The herbal ley cumulatively builds structure year on year as well. It would be really interesting to try and understand this in different clay soils, so different soil textures kind of across the board. And this was in a sandy soil in Oxfordshire, and trying to integrate some more farmer researcher trials, looking at different climate management, historical management, And soil texture would be really interesting in trying to establish whether tillage in the future of the herbal ley can work in different scenarios, and obviously trying to inform policy as a result. Thank you for listening. This research was possible thanks to the University of Nottingham and Rothamsted Research, Unilever for the support in funding the PhD, and UKRI and FarmEd for the support of this study. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was spot on. Thank you very much for keeping to time. So there's clearly, as you say, the herbal leys are contributing to structure, as everyone would kind of hope. But there's this critical issue about how do you get out of that into your cereal crop, because doing it the wrong way, you could lose a lot of the benefits that you've just very patiently spent all that time creating. So with that in mind, I want to hand over now to our next speaker, Annie Landless. Annie, you told me last night that you're quite a minority in the sense that you're a woman who manages a farm and that there aren't enough of you. Is that a reasonable statement?
Yes.
Yes. So, it's really proud to have you here to talk to us today about how you're managing your farm, and particularly herbal. Don't look at me like that. I was meant to be a compliment. How you're managing herbal leys within your system, and particularly how you've struggled and succeeded in establishing crops coming out of that herbal ley period. So please, the floor is yours. Please welcome Annie to the stage.
Know where I'm at, because I have a propensity to talk like my father, farmers. So my name's Annie, and I am going to put my first slide on. This is the farm that I manage. It's Ampney Brook Farm in the Cotswolds near Cirencester. So I've technically been the farm manager officially since the summer, but I've been working there for 3 years and a quarter, and working closely with the old farm manager who'd actually been involved with the farm since 1988. Any of you that are familiar with the RAU, Cirencester Agricultural College, this is the farm at Harn Hill that used to belong to the university that they sold in 2020. So I work for the new owner managing the farm. So it's about 200 hectares, mixed organic farming. We've got a beef suckler herd of pedigree Hereford cattle that are certified with Pasture for Life. We've also got a woodland pig enterprise that we recently started. Currently, we've only got 3 pigs, but they are set to multiply soon, which is quite exciting. We do have a stock person, so it's also not really my problem. I just have to make sure that the numbers stack up and take care of them when he's not around. We also have a market garden. I'm not a grower, but I've been really grappling with how the numbers stack and then fitting that in with the whole farm context and working together, and that's been a lot of learning. And we grow arable crops, which is obviously why I'm here to talk about those. But and we have a big mid-tier stewardship scheme. So our mid-tier scheme should have ended on the 31st of December 2025. We didn't have anything to roll into, so we've extended it for another year, which has also played into quite a lot of our cropping decisions. So as part of our stewardship scheme, which was designed to take the farm through in transition to being all organic, it was basically lots of herbal leys and lots of AB8s, floristically enhanced meadows and wildflowers. So we've got strips and whole fields of those, and we graze those with our cattle, and these are really important for providing the fertility for our arable crops. So we're mob grazing. Is anyone here mob grazing? A few people? Great. I really love the cows. I was brought up on a beef and arable farm. My parents are still farming. And we move electric fences every day. And it might not look like much to you, but it's cow pats and grazed grass and lots of manure going into the soil, which is really what we're looking to do to build soil biology. So in our herbal leys, we've got lots of different plants like chicory, bird's foot trefoil, and plantain and clovers, and these have lots of different root systems that basically they all photosynthesize and they interact with the soil microbiology, and they all play a different role in building soil health. And then we put the cows across them, they eat them, they ruminate, and they spread enzymes and they feed the microbiology through their saliva and through their manure as well. In the winter, we bale graze, so we try to keep the cattle out as much as possible, which can be a challenge on herbal lays. But we unroll bales with a bale unroller, and the cattle eat and trample, mostly eat the hay. We do adapt how much we're feeding and how big the areas are that they move in to try and encourage them to eat and trample as much as possible. And we graze tall covers in the summer as well, so sometimes we lose the cattle in them, which is also great. But I did find in the drought this year with the chicory, when it died off, it became so sharp and horrible to do fencing in. So it's quite interesting, the practicalities of all these things. And we are on have been on a min-till system, growing lots of different crops. And only really this year I've sort of more been in charge of the decisions, but I've always been able to feed into them. And I think what's sort of interesting is I'm going to talk a bit about the practicalities of organic min-till at Ampney Brook and what's worked, and mostly sort of what I've learned and observed over my time being there. So harvest 2024 was rather wet with us, and we were quite experimental. We grew, I think, 5 different varieties, mostly in small areas, all established with min-till equipment. So I think this is a horse joker, which is discs and tines. So that was the first part of the cultivation approach that we took to take out the herbal lays. So in that autumn, we had quite good weather for doing the min-till cultivations. We needed a long stretch of decent dry weather to pull the herbal lay vegetation up and have it die on the surface until we got the right seed bed. Just as the seed beds looked ready for drilling, it started to rain, and then it didn't stop. And we ended up drilling all the winter crops in January on the frost. So we're a bit on the back foot. And as you can see, even looking for where the seeds have germinated, it was pretty wet and sticky because we've got some Cotswold brash, but quite a lot of clay soils on the farm as well. But they did come, and then we also drilled a spring sown wheat as well. We, in the min-till system, have been drilling on a wide row spacing, so about 7 inches, to allow for the use of a camera-guided hoe, which is quite an unusual piece of kit, but our neighbour had one. But it's quite sensitive to conditions, so it was actually too wet to use it in the spring. So we never actually used it, but then we had a lot of bare ground underneath, which was perfect area for herbal lay to regenerate as the season went on. So what I found in this year with knocking out the herbal lays, well, we did a pretty good job and we threw everything we had at it in terms of min-till. We still had this incredible regeneration of herbal lay underneath the crops in certain places. So some of our crops were completely swamped come to harvest with red clover and other things growing up underneath. So my main sort of takeaway was the cost of establishing the crop was very high. Actually, we were growing quite niche crops, emmer and einkorn, expensive seed, doing up to 5-6 passes, and we used contractors, and that was racking up to about £1,000 a hectare. And so even though our output values were high, we weren't making anything. So I'm lucky that I'm allowed to be quite experimental because I don't work for my dad. I work for someone else who lets me just try things, but I wouldn't be able to do any of this at home. But it has been amazing learning for me. And I'm quite a visual soil person. So in this year, when I had some time, I actually went out and dug up some parts of the crop. And I think this is emmer here. And can you see the size of that soil block that I dug up? So some of these ancient grains, they're tall, and the roots really interact with the soil and they grow up nice and tall, and it competed so much better with everything that was growing underneath. So that looks like a relatively okay crop with stuff underneath, whereas this was some of the population varieties which we grow, which are brilliant, but they just didn't compete as well with the herbal lay growing quite aggressively underneath. So it was interesting to see how the roots and the crops actually performed. So fast forward to 2025, when it was dry, to try and fit in with the cattle system that we run, so outwintering, we went for all spring crops this year. So we outwintered the cows on the field that we were then going to plough up in the spring to put into spring wheat and spelt. Unfortunately, it was very dry, bad spring to try ploughing, but really what I was trying to do was to bring the costs down. And in an organic system where we can't draw on herbicides, we're really looking to work with the soil and how we can bury things that might potentially grow. And having been terrified by how much we had regrowing, I wanted to try ploughing to see what would happen, but it ended up being very dry. We also had a min-till area, so you can sort of see the difference between those two. Subsequently, we ended up doing a plough, roll, disc, because it was so lumpy, then drill, which was still high cost, but we managed to bring the costs from sort of seed to harvest down to about 600 quid a hectare, which was better. So that was improved. And it was pretty clean in all the areas where we had established the crop in the first part of the rotation. We also grew spring barley, and this was established with a min-till system. And what was super interesting is that it looked like a field of chicory, and it was again on the wide row spacing. So the chicory just sprung up and took over in all these areas. It looked really pretty, but the old farm manager did not like it. Didn't look good over the hedge cosmetically. But I wonder if those deep chicory roots were helping to move nutrients around in the soil. And this is all sort of anecdotal from my own observation, because the yield was better in that field, not that far behind the contractor's conventional yields. But again, the wide row spacing didn't really help us, and it was too dry to use the camera-guided hoe. So we based it around the system for something that we couldn't use. But what was interesting as well, as you can see, this is at the height of August when it was super dry. In our herbal lays, we still had chicory, trefoil and lucerne all in flower and growing. So we did all right. We didn't have to feed any extra hay or anything to the cattle. The herbal lays were resilient and they have bounced back. 9 minutes. Keep going. So harvest 2026, we've adapted again. This time I really wanted to try and establish our winter crops in 2 passes if we could. So for knocking out the herbal lay, we've done a plough and then a power harrow combi drill with a press on the front. Lowest cost of establishing crops we've done so far. So I think the plough was £68 a hectare and the drill was £63 a hectare. So I was really happy with that, and we've drilled population wheat, YQ and beans. And then we did min-till on the other field that we ploughed the previous year in the spring for the second part of the rotation. And we've actually gone for spelt across 20 hectares because there's quite a lot of different markets, which I'm going to talk about next in that. So far, so good. And this time I was in charge. So I've narrowed the row spacing and we've gone for the more traditional organic sort of 4 or 5 inch row spacing, which means that, and a higher seed rate. So it means that you've got more plants, more chance for them to compete with what's growing there, and shade out anything that's underneath. So almost drawing on some of the einkorn Emma principles of having bigger leaf area and hopefully more chance for the crop to thrive, and less chance for the herbal lay to push back up. But I mean, this will be my 4th harvest, so I'm still really observing and adapting every year and trying to react to the conditions that we have. But yeah, so far I'm quite happy, quite excited to see where it goes. So the final slide is about where we're selling to. So I've talked a bit about cost. Our yields haven't been great, definitely could do better, and I'm always thinking about how to balance cost, soil health, because we really are all about building soil health and managing the whole farm as an ecosystem, but then also output values. And some of the kind of cost and lower yields are more than compensated for in how we have our output value. So if we could just bring the yields up, it would really come together economically. So I have lots of questions to ask of these things. We're really lucky to have some great local mills in the Cotswolds. So we work with Matthews, Cotswold Flour, Shipton Mill we've worked with, who then supplied Gales Bakery, and they put my poster up in 150 bakeries, which was quite alarming. A lot of people sent me messages about that. And they often all come to the farm. We also grew the barley. Unfortunately, it didn't make it to Stroud Brewery because it didn't make the spec, but they still came out to see us, which was great. And I'm part of the Southwest Grain Network and a group of farmers who grow 2 varieties for them, which go to can mills in Dorset. So we have the opportunity to meet. This is Anders, who bred Marajatoba. He came over to Fred's farm in Somerset, and we all got to meet him and talk about why he bred that variety to be high protein as an organic variety that works well, that can rival imported Malika, and it consistently achieves 12% and above protein. And I should also mention that where our yields weren't so good, our quality was phenomenal, and even in the Miller's Choice, despite its really poor yield, it was 14% protein, so Gales were absolutely thrilled with that. So it's just about, I mean, I'm sure that's because there's so much clover, and it's how to find the balance. And with the South West Grain Network, I'm very lucky. I mean, we're organic, we haven't got an agronomist. The old farm manager is a qualified agronomist, but I have a lot of friends in the network who I can voice note and say, I don't know what I'm doing, like, can you help me with this? And so I'm always asking questions to the other farmers, and we get together. So when all the grain is harvested at Fred's farm, they've got testing equipment, so we'll all bring our own samples, and then we get together and test them. And we've also had the South West Grain Network to our farm and met the bakers that are actually working with the grain that we produce. And I've had some of the grain back and milled it myself and baked with it, which is really amazing to be part of all those points in the chain and have so many opportunities to learn from other people in the network. So I think it speaks quite well to this, particularly in the sort of resilience report about collaboration and all of the benefits that you can have of actually talking to people about what we're doing and being really open. I mean, one of the things we're thinking about doing in the grain network is a benchmarking exercise for costs, yields, output values. And one of the conversations that we had was that the yield of Mariagetoba was not as expected, so they've actually put the output price per tonne up from £650 a tonne to £685 a tonne for this year's harvest. So that's always an open conversation about how to make it work better for all people in the chain. So yeah, I've learned a lot from a really great group of people, and lucky to have lots of friends, and also to have been going to Groundswell and met John 10 years ago as well. And it sort of culminated in this with lots more to come. Right, I think that's it. I'll come back. I'll leave that there.
Thank you very much, Annie. And again, thank you for sticking to time. So our final speaker is a local boy, come the shortest distance. Paul, from a farming family, but you're a systems engineer. I don't think I've ever met a systems engineer, but it was evident to me that you think very deeply as a consequence of that training about the way you farm. And you're combining companion crops in the field, many different crops, and cover, and herbal lays, of course. So would you please now enlighten us about your approaches to herbal lays and your approaches for moving around the rotation?
Right, I have fallen flat on my face on the first slide because I didn't realise. Yeah, anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Paul Baker. I'm farming just up the road, about 350 acres. And I'm just going to run you through what we're doing in our arable system to reduce input costs. So we have organic and conventional systems. We have a small poultry enterprise rearing ducks for meat. Organic heifer rearing, we're reintroducing sheep to the farm, enterprise stacking, and sort of generally we're experimental, not afraid to try anything new. And that actually sort of makes things a bit more interesting, spices life up a bit. So first in the firing line is the agronomist. If you aren't on the same page, they don't have the same direction of travel as you, this is going to be very difficult. If they're sending lorry loads of chem your way and massive bills, it's really difficult to fight against them. My agronomist is an independent, he's on a walking fee, he's got absolutely no motivation whatsoever to sell me anything. Understand your costs. So in the same vein, like we need to have a bit of a shift in farming. We're focusing on yield where it should be on profit. We need to understand where we are. You can't, there's no point growing a record yield and losing money on it. So assess your starting point. You might not go as far as getting a microscope out, but dig a hole, look at your soil. Up to about 3 years ago, I sort of didn't really know what I was looking at. But you'll get to know, count some worms, give it a sniff. Like you'll know what's good and what's bad. So it'll all start making sense in time. As you start reducing your inputs, the soil will wake up. So mixed cropping. Nothing on the farm is planted as a monocrop. It has a companion of some sort. So the companion crops are terminated before harvest. In the middle there, we have it's organic rye with a bean companion crop. We'll just graze that out with sheep in the spring if it's ever dry enough. So that will get rid of that the companion. Intercrops, so that will be harvested or taken to harvest. On the left, we have a 5-way polycrop. It's wheat, barley, oats, triticale, and peas. So that some of that goes for whole crop, but some of it we do harvest it. That's a really good market for animal feed. It's organic. So on the right-hand side, we have the mixed crops. You've got oats, winter oats and beans. I will try to separate that. I kind of regret doing that now, to be honest. It's going to be a bit of a pain. And the oilseed rape, vetch, linseed and buckwheat. Initially, it was just sort of to try and confuse the cabbage stem flea beetle. Most of it got to harvest, and I've got 4 tons of vetch in the shed. So it's a bit of a pain. But ultimately, we're looking to take advantage of the synergy. I probably don't plan far enough ahead on how I'm going to deal with it, but I think the markets need to change for us to be able to actually market this as a whole, like especially animal feed. It's not really a bother. But yeah, take advantage of the synergy, whether that be just the nitrogen from the legumes, or it could be to deter pests. Variety blends are becoming more popular now. They're quite mainstream, I think. So we have a 7-way wheat blend. You'll just combine some varieties which are high yielding and some which are sort of more better disease resistant scores. Livestock, like I said, we're trying to integrate sheep. They're not without their troubles, but we use them for disease control and also taking out the companions. It does look a mess when they're in there, but you've got to hold your nerve. They'll take away a lot of the diseased leaves from over the winter. This does force the plant to tiller, which is exactly what we want. And you've got the added biology from the back end of the sheep. And that'll help you. If they do a good job, you can completely eliminate your T0. So all this is stuff that our grandparents used to do. It's nothing new. Nitrogen. I think the soil-applied nitrogen is renowned for being extremely inefficient. We do over-apply it, which doesn't help. The plants can't take it up all in one go, so you can lose it to volatilization, leaching through the soil profile, for example. So, it's thought that that soil-applied nitrogen is around 30 to 70% efficient. So I think that highlights that the conditions are crucial to your success with that. But to apply 200 kilos of soil-applied nitrogen is about £230 a hectare. But you compare that to the dissolved or melted urea. So there are more people doing it now, but I just dissolve mine in a bulk tank. There is specialist kit available. There's Toe and Fert. I think Matt's on the Terra Farmer stand. I'm too tight to buy one of those, so I just chuck mine in an old bulk milk tank and pump it into the sprayer and just spray it through the standard flat fans, what I have. So this is that much more efficient because we're bypassing the soil uptake. So it's a network route. So it's bypassing all of those inefficiencies. It goes straight into the leaf, straight into the plant. It's about 2.5 times is what we're saying. I think it's probably got potential to be much higher than that. So to apply the equivalent nitrogen to the soil applied, it's costing you £70 per hectare. But I would say don't apply all of it, or you can't apply all of it in the foliar form because early in the season you don't actually have a closed canopy, so you will have waste, and also ammonium nitrate does have benefits for yield as well early in the season. Essential elements for nitrogen uptake. So most people, everyone knows about sulfur, but there are overlooked minerals, things like elements like molybdenum. But you can, if you are short of anything, you won't actually be taking up the nitrogen quite as efficiently as you could. So you can do sap analysis or leaf analysis to know exactly what's in the plant, what you're lacking. and apply with a carbon source. This especially applies to the soil nitrogens. If it's dissolved, and we're always applying too much, anything in the soil which the plant hasn't already taken up is liable to be leached. If you apply a carbon source, this will prime the soil biology. They'll consume some excess nitrogen and it'll be stored in their bodies and it'll be available again to the plant on their deaths. So the chemical efficiency, water quality is key. Any dissolved minerals in your water that you use, as a borehole water, it could be just mains water or anything like that, any dissolved minerals will bind with your actives as soon as you put them in the tank. So I use rainwater. There's plenty of that at the moment. The tanks are all full, so that just stops that from happening. Water pH, if you keep the water pH low, around 4, it slows the degradation of the active ingredients in the tank, and it's thought at around pH, a lower pH, about 4, the plant actually takes it up faster, so it's not sitting on the leaf to be wasted or whatever. Thresholds for application. If your agronomist does ping you a whole stack of recommendations, just question it. Does it need to happen? Is it bad enough to treat the whole field? You might design your own threshold tests, so many weeds per square metre, or just get to understand it. Don't just do what you're told. It's your money. Antagonism, what by this I mean, are your inputs harming your crop? Some of the classics are herbicides. You might have sprayed out some grass weeds or something, and your cereal crop is quite closely related to those grasses, and the crop turns yellow. So it's not doing it much good. So on that, with the bricks, you can actually see how your inputs are affecting the crops. So if you leave a check strip, for example, there's a bricks meters on the left, so I'm just squeezing out some sap from the plants onto the prism. They're about 10 quid on Amazon, they're not very much. It's sort of just a rough and ready test to see how well the plants are photosynthesizing. So it'll be sort of dissolved minerals and sugars in the plant. Ultimately, that's the plant's engine. And if your inputs are reducing that, then you could be affecting your yield. You could do this with any snake oils that someone's trying to flog you. You can see actually if it's doing anything at all. Soil tests generally will tell you, or the bog standard test will tell you what's available in the soil right now to the plant. It doesn't say anything about what's not available, which they often come with recommendations to spend loads of money, really, don't they? And the leaf testing, like the sap analysis tells you what's happening in the plant right now. So your soil test might say that something's not available, but the leaf test is telling you otherwise. So I go with the leaf, or is that a hint? oh, we're good. So yeah, that could tell you otherwise, and so I just react to the sap analysis because I think that's just the most accurate. Your biology's working, your plant's getting what's not available, what's not showing up on your soil test. And soil assessments, like I said early on, just get to know your soil, have a look around. In the middle, there's a picture of the penetrometer. So we put a set weight on it, it'll tell you where like a compacted layer is. So by digging through that compacted layer, this probe is 1 metre long, and I just saw almost leaning on it. It just, with one hand, it just went straight into the ground. When we're talking about weather and like water infiltration and water holding capacity and like stopping runoff, if you can make the whole soil profile like that, I have no idea how, but I know there's a problem there. So I think that's critical. And thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. So we have 20 minutes left before lunch. I'm going to ask a few questions, but then I'm going to open the floor so that you can ask your questions. I want to ask you, the farmers particularly, you're all growing a variety of different green covers. As Kits was showing, the longer you have green covers in the field, the likelihood is of more organic carbon you're pumping into the soil, and we know that. I think we're beyond arguing about this anymore. We know that more organic matter in the soil is going to bring increased porosity. And are you seeing water behaving differently on the fields that you have managed over a consistent period of time? Because theoretically, that's what we should be seeing. Are you seeing that yourself practically? I mean, is it infiltrating quicker? Are you flooding less? Are you holding more during the droughts?
I have, so on the organic land in particular, because we're mostly spring cropped, we have an awful lot of cover crops, and one of the cover crops this year, it was everything we had in the shed, it's like 21 seeds or something. And it was interesting during the heavy, all the heavy rain, like driving around the countryside, going different places, the colour of the water coming out of the fields. There was nothing running out of our gateway when it was raining. Everybody, some others, it was coming out dirty water out the gate. But ours was running out days after. It's like the water, it all soaked in and it was slowly running out. So I'm seeing big changes, doing very simple things, to be honest.
Good things.
Very, very good things.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought it was quite wet where we are, and then I came down on the train yesterday, and yeah, it's terrifying what you guys had to put up with. But it's pleasing how it soaks in, but it doesn't. It's not universal. I mean, this is what it's very. Some fields which really ought to be just soaking it up aren't, and I just can't put my finger. And I don't think it's because you were dancing there, Andy. It's not. I don't think the compaction's all down to non-farming activities, but it's we're doing something wrong and something right, and we're still learning. But it's definitely an improvement, and water's such a big thing which we've been taking for granted for so long, and we can't any longer. We've got to try and hold it on the land as long as we can. I think it's
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got lots and lots of years of experience in Harn Hill, so I don't have so many points of reference to compare, but we had a very, very wet winter, and that was quite stressful with cows outside, especially without the planning and foresight that I have now from having been through that. And there were parts of the farm a few winters ago that were so underwater, and we just felt we couldn't put the cows out there. With the adaptation in how we've changed our winter grazing, so mob grazing in particular, and unrolling bales, and we've been mob grazing now for probably 18 months or so, and I think all these things could take a long time to change, but I know that we're putting a lot of organic matter into the soil with unrolling bales, and we unroll them specifically in wetter places, and they seem to be less wet, which is good. So anything that cows aren't eating is getting absorbed into the soil. That's organic matter. It's feeding the soil microbiome and creating porosity in the soil, which allows the water to soak in. So on some of our heavier parts, where it can be a bit hair-raising to think, are we really going to put the cows out there on a herbal lay in this very wet time? And it's been okay, and we've managed it, and we have won over the old farm manager who's been on the farm since the 80s, and he now follows the mob grazing system, which has been a success in terms of people and water, I would say.
That's great. It's really good that you're all seeing the practical benefits of this in the field, because science often predicts these things, and then it's a bit of a disappointment when you're not seeing them. So that's really good. The other question I had was this morning, along with all the other sort of resilience issues, there was data to show that we're going to get fewer frosts in the future. And I know that, well, I think I know, that crimping after a frost, particularly a very heavy frost, is a very effective way of terminating a herbal layer. And I'm wondering, are you doing that now? Are you starting to worry about whether that will be effective in the future, and whether you need to, start to play around with other approaches?
I have been, with the organic, I've been wanting to go down, take a strip till approach. But because terminating the cover crops has been an issue, then I've gone with a shallower plough. But yeah, it is a worry, because it seems just so straightforward. So the Americans saying that, we'll grow this cover crop and we just, the frost kills it all. It works so well. But whether it's selecting your crop whether you don't rely on the frost, you might just have to adapt. You might go for something that will crimp much easier. But it could be that your cover crops are monocrops, and you can't, because that's some things that you just cannot kill with a roll, like rabbit fodder, like stubble turnip or something like that.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, cover crops are fine because they're kind of annuals on the whole, and they're relatively easy to kill. Herbal lays, because they're all perennial plants, they're used to being taking a lot of attention on top, and they still sprout back. And yeah, glyphosate's brilliant, really. Getting rid of them. And the really lovely thing about glyphosate is it'll kill most of your herbal lays, but leave the clover. And we've got a lot of fields with just a permanent understory of clover as a legacy of a herbal lay 5 or 6 years ago. And it's just and Anne is right. Lovely thing about these heritage grains, you grow them up here, and it doesn't matter if there's a forest of clover underneath. It's not going to interfere with your harvesting too much, and you get fantastic straw and rolling straw out. And we've got our cows out on the corral, and we're rolling out lovely long straw with clover in amongst it as bedding, and it's great feed as well. It's not answering your question, as I've gone off on one again. But it's I don't know how to get rid of herbal lays. I mean, I'm quite interested in this idea of just there's some quite good machines which will just hoe underneath the surface and cut all the roots. But then after 4 or 5 years of herbal lay, you've left a lot of seeds on the surface, and then if you're just cultivating that surface, you're asking them all to come shooting up in your following wheat crop or bean crop, whatever you're going to grow next. So, ploughing, much as I hate to say it, probably has got, if you don't want to use glyphosate, it's probably quite a good answer, getting rid of a herbal lay.
Right. Well, on
I
that
feel
bombshell, are there any questions from the floor? Because obviously my questions are eliciting the wrong responses. So this gentleman here.
Thank you. Everyone's talking about soil structure and how to improve it. Nobody has mentioned dung beetles. We've got 58 species of dung beetle in the UK. Are any of the agronomists talking about dung beetles and using less wormers, or because they're all trying to sell things, are they not mentioning dung beetles? And on all of these organic farms, I presume you're not using wormers on the cattle or sheep, but a lot of farms are, and the dung beetles are in real trouble. So I'd be interested to hear.
Annie, I think that's a question. Well, Paul, why don't you both have a go?
Oh, sorry.
You go.
Ladies first.
And then I'll go next.
Since we have reduced the wormers in our cattle, we've seen just a dramatic change. The amount of dung beetles we've seen around. We contract rear the heifers, so there was a certain amount of stick from the owner, like saying, "Oh, sorry, we've wormed them. Your dung beetles are doomed," and things like that. But when you turn the pats over, you know where to look for them. We're seeing a massive increase, and it's really impressive how deep the burrows go. Just had a little bit just poked a stick down, and it was going down that far, if not further. So I think it's not just the benefit of clearing the dung away, but you've got the infiltration. Again, we're going back to the weather and the resilience.
And we had a picture of a rotifer that you'd seen under your microscope. Do you spend as much time looking at your dung beetles?
Yeah. Not quite as much. No, but it's just something. Yeah, I think when you see value in it, I'll spend a bit more time on it, and it is quite addictive actually getting compost samples and things like that. Just seeing, because you can see the quality of it with a microscope, whereas otherwise you'd be guessing. So I think it's the same with the soil. You can see the difference between your practices, what you may otherwise not see.
Annie, how are you with the dung beetles?
I do like a dung beetle, but I don't. I mean, I quite enjoy to dig holes and look at the soil structure and turn over cowpats, and I love cowpats. And we have so many birds that follow behind the cattle, lots of wagtails. and things that are picking through the insects and starlings at this time of year. But I think it's worth saying, I mean, we're talking about arable, but we're also talking about cows and dung beetles, which is so brilliant in this mixed farming setting. Our cattle have been on the farm for 5 years, and we've done fecal egg counts, and I have actually been into the vets and learnt how to do them every year, and we've never had to worm them, so they've never been wormed on the farm. And I'm sure that is a lot to do with the mob grazing and the herbal lays. So there's lots of anthelmintic plants, I hope I'm saying that right, that are natural worms in the herbal lays, so really good for cattle health as well as soil health. So the cattle are doing really well. We don't need to worm them. We're also moving them off the pasture, so we get that they're on the previous day. So we're getting maximum cow pats in one area. It's probably massive dung beetle party in one area. No wormers, loads of food for them, loads of cow pats, and then the cows just move on. And yeah, brilliant for soil health. Lots of drainage channels, and they're a key indicator that there'll be lots of other microbiology in the soil, earthworms, and all the sort of microfauna that you do need to look at under a microscope as well when one has the time to do these things.
Does that answer your question? Good, a happy customer. Who are you pointing? Ah, yeah, Silas, hi.
Hi, Silas Lawrence, farmer in the Cotswolds, independent consultant. I would love to know from you guys, a lot of the farmers in this room are obviously quite innovative, trying new stuff, but we're all limited with how much we can do, and we're all trying to do too much already. So if we could take the financial risk out and the time requirement, what is one thing you guys would love to try on your farm that you're not doing, or one thing you would like to be able to do differently?
Who wants to start? I'll pick on someone.
I haven't got a particular thing in mind that I was thinking of trying, but a lot of because with the financial risk, say a lot of it is machinery. On our scale, we can't. I wanted to go do some strip tilling, for example, and the kit was just eye-watering for a 350-acre farm. We couldn't stomach that. So actually, being able to, I was an ex-engineer, so I'm able to buy the kit and adapt it myself with help from the landlord. Actually, they help pay for the machinery. But yeah, I think even on these equipment grants, the prices are inflated before you buy it, so you're not any better off. So I think there's a lot for the smaller farm. The larger scale guys, it's well worth them doing it, and there's a payback. But for us, there isn't. So sorry, that doesn't quite answer your question, but I think that's one of the hurdles.
I have thought of something, which is good. A while ago, with the South West Grain Network, I visited a farm in Yorkshire trialling living mulches, which I think was an innovative farmer's trial on their farm. And I have been fascinated by our arable crops that, while they were low yielding when they were swamped in clover and other things, as I mentioned, the quality was very good. And also being brought up on the groundswell and soil health principles through soil mentor, keeping the ground covered when you're also then trying to knock everything out to grow an arable crop. It's a weird conflict in my mind of trying to kill everything and then grow something else, but knowing that diversity and ground cover and roots are good. How can a resilient, decent enough, profitable yielding arable crop be also good for soil health, diversity, insects, etc.? So living mulches and I guess undersowing of clover and having a constant growth of micro clovers or other things underneath your arable crop that doesn't compete too much but brings the benefits. I'm interested in that, but I've obviously seen it essentially we had a living mulch in the wet summer of 24, but it had implications for our yield, which had implications for the balance sheet. But how can you establish it and actually clover seed is quite expensive. I then looked into seed for microclover and the risk was too high of trying it when there were so many other variables that I didn't understand either. But in the future, I would love to see how that could work. And I know John Letts has done it in other places with continuous wheat and draw on all these different projects. So there is this farm in Yorkshire that we're trying lots of different, I think it's the Frasers, I remember Hannah Fraser, and they showed us all their trial plots of different types of microclovers and things they were trying with growing underneath their wheat crops for soil health, biodiversity, quality in the crop and which would work to balance with the crops. Hope that makes sense, Silas.
Yeah, well, I agree with you about machines. I think, it'd be lovely to have a really good workshop and turn some of these things out. You can make machines that work for you. I mean, one of the things I've become obsessed about is acorns. They're fantastically nutritious. The tree grows there all year round. You haven't got to do much. You can graze underneath it. And find a way of harvesting and processing acorns. Acorns, our Neolithic ancestors lived on acorns. In a fortnight, you could collect enough food to last your family for a year. And then you didn't have to do anything else much, but a bit of hunting, and, life was pretty good. But you've got to process it. They're full of tannins, and it's, and obviously you don't get a really good harvest every year. This year was, I don't know what it's like down here, but it was bonkers with us. So branches breaking on the oak trees because there's so many acorns on them. And it's not just acorns, there's walnuts, there's lots of other nut trees. But there's, I think we're bonkers focusing. Are you trying to shut me up again?
Not at all. I haven't tried to shut you up at all once.
No, it's all right.
You just have a guilty conscience.
I have got a guilty conscience, I'm sorry. But I mean, it's, growing commodity crops, as I was saying, is completely bonkers. And, we're always on a hiding to nothing. But if we can find stuff which wants to grow on our land and just harvest that naturally, wonderful. Doesn't really answer your question, but I thought I'd say it anyway. So
I think if we're quick, we have time for 2 questions. Hello.
Good afternoon, Chris Marshall from Launceston. I think all 3 farmers have talked about companion cropping in some type of form. How have you got a swag on what benefit it gives you in terms of, you say, reduced yield but higher quality? Can you sort of explain a bit more or where you would like to go with that in your future priorities?
Well, the balance, I think. How to make it work. And I feel like we've gone quite far the other way with trying ploughing to basically knock out all the competition and see if we can continue to achieve the quality. And I like the companion cropping for all the biodiversity, soil health benefits I mentioned, but then with the varieties that we choose, I have intentionally chosen varieties, so population grains that are known for their high protein because we're aiming to grow milling wheats for bread making. And Marajatoba was a Danish population variety brought over. A friend of mine bought 10 tons over in a lorry on quite a crazy trip and grew it about 10 minutes down the road from our farm and ended up giving me some of the seed so we could try it. And we went to see the crop in the field and it came off at, I think, 13 or 14% protein. And we thought, let's give this a go. And yeah, so selecting the right varieties also will help us maintain that quality. And then looking at the heritage with the taller varieties, like how can we draw on all these different things? And a lot of the populations, I don't know how much everyone knows about populations, but there's currently, I think, a 7-year sort of easement by DEFRA that's allowing some trade in these population varieties so farmers can try them. And Marajatoba, as part of the Southwest Grain Network, is a test variety to see if, almost like a cow having a passport, can we track this grain through the system and see how it's evolving with the farmers? Because it's genetically diverse, so the plants all look different in the field. Some of them are tall, some of them are short. The ears look different, some of them have got horns, some of them haven't. And they express themselves based on the conditions of that year. So the idea is that it becomes more resilient as the years go on. And I suppose depending on your soil type, what else you've got growing, if you're doing companion crops, can those genetically diverse varieties adapt with your system as it evolves? And we have seed for the first time this year as well. And there's a cost to that too. So I'm thinking, we've now not made money on that crop because we didn't grow that. So there's so many implications to think about, but we are investing in the future of the farm by doing that. But then offset with the barley, we decided not to save any and sell it to a local pig farmer, because otherwise the loss would have been quite big if we had actually saved some for seed. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question with quite a lot of the external factors that I'm thinking about that are held with those two.
You're going to have to use a haiku, would be really useful right now.
With the quality, I think, like our polycrop, I was growing that 5-way polycrop, the protein, I haven't really been that experienced in testing these, but it came back with, well, it was 25% protein, which was quite impressive. So, and also with the polycrops, you're getting increased yields. I think it's about 20% above if you grew them individually, some studies have indicated. But if you were going to separate them again, you'd actually wipe out your profit. So if you're able to market them together and everything, that's key for me. But yeah, I think the quality it really is there on the mixed crops, polycrops, and you've got actually it's cheaper to grow, lower disease. It's a higher disease resistance, and it's a numbers game as well. If you're growing several together and you lose the yield on one plant, it's not the end of the world. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Can I do a haiku on that?
Really?
Well, I mean, God doesn't do monocrops, or for the pagans amongst you, Mother Nature doesn't. It's not, you just don't get monocrops in nature, and there's a really good reason for that. So, I mean, that should be enough. Listen to the Almighty.
Well,
praise be. Yeah.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. You just spent a perfectly good hour and a half listening to us talk about resilience and herbal lays. Thank you very much for listening, and would you please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you.